It's Graphic Novel of the Month Club Kids version, which is the best version. And our book this month, I'm holding it. You can see it behind us. It's WRASSLE Castle, which is really awesome. It's a big fun book, and it's goofy and joyous, and it's what you want in your comics, kids. We're really lucky to have the authors, Paul Tobin and is it Tobin or Tobin?
Tobin.
Tobin. And Colleen Coover right there. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah. So the first question is the first question I ask from everybody, and I love this question so much. Why comics? Of all the things you could be doing in your life, what is it about comics that makes you go, man, this is the thing that pushes my button?
I think just the combination of the art and the writing just draws me in. I feel like I'm a little deeper into the world. I feel like I know what's going on. I feel the characters more. I feel everything. I feel more connected with comics.
And to be honest, it was never not comics. It started out as comics and it stayed as comics.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading from like the time I could read. I was one of those like kindergartners and first graders that like the teacher would give out ribbons and say, okay, so and so read one book and so read another, and Paul over there read 200, so I guess he gets 200 gold stars. And
Same. I remember our second grade, my second grade teacher, Mr. Towers, had a board of spaceships, so your spaceship would fly a certain amount.
Oh, that's great.
And I got the biggest spaceship because every time you would do a loop, you would get a better special spaceship. I had this sweetest spaceship by the time I read a lot more than my classmates, and everybody thought I was weird.
Yeah, me too.
Super cool. But you guys are of the age where there weren't a lot of comics in your classrooms, right?
Oh no!
Oh no!
No, not in the classroom.
Yeah.
But my grandmother went to like tons of garage sales and house sales and things like that. Like she would go to like 3 or 4 of them a day, literally. And so she was just buying everything. So when I went to her house, there was just stacks and stacks and stacks of like comics from all from all time periods and all genres, which I think is one of the reasons that I have a tendency to write in a lot of different genres, is because when I grew up reading, it was if it was a Richie Rich comic or Daredevil comic, it didn't make much difference to me. It was just I wanted to read the characters.
Yeah. Similarly, I had a grandmother who worked at a Five and Dime or drugstore or something like that, a store with a newsstand. So when it came time to send the remainder books back, the remainder comics, they wouldn't send the whole comic back. They would just take the cover off.
Yeah.
And send that back to get store credit. So I got all those comics. Actually, I had an older sister that got all of them, and then she's 7 years older than me, so she was reading a long time before I was ready to read. So I was reading comics before I could read.
Yeah.
I think that's another reason, like reading comics, you don't even really at first need to know how to read. You can read the pictures before you can read the words. So they're very good at leading you into reading and then keeping you there.
Yeah.
I actually remember being a kid reading a comic and realizing that the captions, which I had always considered to be optional, were actually part of the story.
As a writer, having you sit next to me and say that captions are optional.
Captions are not optional. They are part of the story.
So again, I certainly remember a lot of the because we're roughly the same age, I think, the three of us. And I remember there being lots of comics coming out where the caption was just describing what was in the panels. And you're like, why are you telling me the thing that I can see? Yeah, even then, I knew that there was something wrong with that.
There was a Conan comic that was like Conan, like the picture is Conan stepping across a stream on some rocks, and the caption is Conan steps across the stream on the rocks, and it's like, what are you doing? You've added nothing.
Give me a little more.
Yeah.
That's funny. So do you guys, either of you, like remember the first comic that really lit you on fire? Like the one where you're like, oh, this is it. Was there a comic like that? Maybe there wasn't because you had so many.
I mean, I'd been reading a lot, but like the first time I can remember was like my cousin had cleaned out a garage at one point for a neighbor, and in the garage there was a whole box of primarily Marvel, but Marvel and DC books from the 60s, and there was an issue of Tales to Astonish. I believe it's issue 100, where Submariner fought the Hulk, and oh man, I that got me going.
Yeah,
It was like
yeah.
two big strong guys batting it out each other. I really love that. The artist was Marie Severin, and yeah,
Nice.
it was really exciting for me. And it was like at a time period where I didn't realize yet that like there would never like nobody's going to truly win. It's not, so I was like the Hulk throws the Submariner at one point, and the Submariner's like desperately trying not to hit the ground because it could kill him. And I was like, is he gonna die? I'm like, no, he's gonna be okay. But I didn't realize that yet, so it was like really exciting.
Yeah, it's true though. I literally can't remember the first comic I read. I remember the first comic that freaked me out.
Yeah, well, that was kind of what I was looking for. Was something like the first one you remember that you're like, wow, yeah.
I remember being sat under one of those old-fashioned hair dryers when I was little, and my mom just stuck a comic in my hands to occupy me while I was sitting under the hair dryer, and it was one of my older sister's comics. She preferred like the horror comics of Marvel and DC of the late 60s, early 70s. So I was reading this horror comic about a cat who becomes like this menacing ghost thing at night and then comes back at night as a cat. But I remember that really freaked me out.
Wow, I bet. Yeah.
Your cat lives with an old lady.
We both have barber stories because when I was growing up, my dad would take me to a barber that had like stacks of coverless Marvel westerns, the westerns from the 60s and things like that. So, all that Rawhide Kid and Two Gun Kid and things like that. And it was very definitely a case of the barber like kind of push me out of the chair going, I'm done, you can leave now. And I'm like, oh, the Two Gun Kid's in trouble. I'm just gonna stay here until this is all good.
That's great. Well, so let's maybe talk about WRASSLE Castle and where it came from. Where did it come from?
Well, as Colleen will tell you, I wander around the house blabbering a lot. Like my mind just runs constantly, and I'm like saying things. And one day I just blurted out WRASSLE Castle, and then my mind went, no, that's a good title.
That's a good title.
It's fun to say, and it leads you into something. So we just developed WRASSLE Castle around that. And I think it has a lot of roots in my love of manga and manhwa and things like Dragon Ball and some movies like there was a movie Shaolin Soccer
Yeah.
that like I really like taking an average thing and just blowing it over the top and just going and going and going and going and Shaolin Soccer was one of the early impetuses for that.
And it was a good mashup movie of sports and kung fu.
Yeah, if you've never seen it, it's a really fun movie. It's like it's very definitely like one of the like a combination of I tried to score a goal on you but I failed, but you have not yet witnessed my true power, and then a soccer ball is like coming down from space and things like that.
There's a lot of Dragon Ball Z.
There's a lot of Dragon Ball Z in
There's
it.
a lot of One Piece DNA in WRASSLE Castle.
Yeah.
There's a lot of yeah.
I just
sort
like
of thing.
I like simple things taken to absurd levels at times.
Yeah. Did you so you say you walk around the house and you just sort of talk about ideas, right?
Babble is a better word.
Okay. All right. I was trying to give it a little class,
Yeah, don't. I'm not classy. No.
Sometimes he'll like come to me and he's like, I thought of another book, and I'm like, oh no,
oh
no, another idea, stop. But actually, I think WRASSLE Castle was one of those times like, oh, I thought of another book, and it's like, WRASSLE Castle, ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the name alone just does it.
It kind of does.
tells you most of what you need to know. You know, maybe not the specifics of like
Right.
who's wrestling who and why, but you know,
Yeah, you get a feel for it.
yeah, absolutely. Uh, you write a lot of stuff by yourself, Paul. So what about this idea was an idea that you guys thought, oh, we want to write this together?
Well, Colleen, I like Colleen's ideas. We, can go back and forth a little, and she has always acted as a certain degree as an editor for me. Like I'll run ideas past her. Sometimes I'll hunker down. But it just seemed like a fun and joyous thing, and we do a project together called Bandette, which and she is the artist for that, and I'm
Yep.
the writer, and I
Yep.
I don't let her touch the writing for that. She doesn't
Right.
she doesn't really get much input, and so I figured if since she spends all her time drawing and not getting input on story, it would be fun to collaborate story wise on a different project. Because I mean, one of the things I love about being a writer is I talk to so many artists, and I'm like, so how many projects are you working on? And they're like, one. What do you mean? And I'm like, oh, I'm on 10. And I feel bad sometimes because it would drive me crazy to just work on one project at a time. So I just wanted an easy way for Colleen to work on at least two.
Yeah, and as an artist, I'm a one project at a time kind of person. I don't really have the bandwidth to work on more than one thing artistically. I mean, like visually.
Yeah.
So this was the way to work on more than one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Which I think is important because you need, no matter how much you love working on a project, sometimes your brain needs a break, and you can come back with like fresher ideas or fresher attitude and things like that. Because your mind starts to wander.
Yeah, no, I can see that. So it's interesting that you said earlier that you're kind of, I'll use the big word, bifurcating the work on Bandette, where you're writing it and you're drawing it, and like you're not really, because I actually would have thought that you would have, I don't know, been a lot more back and forth on that one. Interesting.
Yeah. Now, when we work together as writer artist, we generally stick to the very traditional roles of writer and artist. And
Interesting.
I think we really prefer it that way. And as you said, I think the most contribution to the story I'll make is as an editor and be like, oh, you wrote this person when it should be that person, or
Spelling check and things like that. Yeah,
very occasionally.
Colleen doesn't see a Bandette script until it's absolutely done.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't even talk about it beforehand.
No.
I'm just like, yep, here you go.
No. And very occasionally I'll say, hey, what if? But it's only like for one panel. It's never like this should be the way the direction goes.
Yeah.
Interesting. I that fascinates me actually. Do you write like a traditional long form script? You know, page one, panel one, some dialogue, page. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'm probably, my scripts are a little long. I'm not quite Alan Moore, but I've had a few editors say, hey, can you kind of encapsulate a little more? Because I'll call shots and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't mind at all if an artist makes changes, because sometimes when you think of things in your head, and then they get down on a page and it's like, oh, that doesn't work, so you have to change things around, and an artist should have the freedom to do that. But yeah, I call pretty much everything in a script.
Yeah. Well, that's my natural next question then, Colleen, is how much are you changing? How much are you not even changing, but reframing, because it seems to me that's a lot what a comic artist is doing with the script.
Sure. Yeah. It's hard to say because we've worked together for so long.
Yeah.
So unlike some other artists who gets one of his scripts, I sort of have like this automatic translation device in my head of this is what he's looking for when he says XYZ.
Yeah.
So I can't really say. I know that occasionally he'll write things that I'm like, well, on the page this is how it would work better, and I know that this is what he actually wants.
Yeah.
Yeah, she changes very little, Bandette. But when we work on Wrassle Castle together, like I start the writing, but it's like a general like paragraph or direction, and then
Mhm.
Colleen will say, what if we go in this direction, and then I'll expand on that a little, and then she'll nudge it
Refine
this and that, and it's
dialogue.
just like we
Yeah.
we bat it back and forth
Right.
before we really get it, and then sometimes once it's down to like the panel breakdown and the dialogue, I'll just hand it off to her and she can finish the scripts.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a picture in my head of you guys sort of running around your living room, shouting dialogue at each other, and acting it out, because it's that kind of a book,
Oh, Bandette? Yeah, I'm
No,
not.
no, I'm not for Bandit. I'm sorry, I picked up the wrong one. For Wrassle Castle, like I just kind of had this picture of you, ah, at each
To a
other.
certain degree, one of us will come up with like a cool move for name for a wrestling move and kind of shout that out, and the other one will kind of look strangely at them until they figure out what they're talking about, you know, because it's nice to be, just, you know, like
Yeah.
kind of sitting on a couch together watching, TV, and then one of us will shout out like "Moonshot Massacre," and it's like, what are you talking about? How does? Oh, okay, Wrestle Castle. Yeah. Maybe I'm more amused by it than she is.
Well, I just had this picture in my head. If I.
Yeah, no, I think if we wrote that way, it would be bad.
Okay, so you come up with the idea, and it strikes me that this is not the kind of idea that there was even any consideration that you would draw, Colleen, right? Because
No,
yeah,
yeah, this just it's a little bit. It's out of my wheelhouse. I could have drawn it, but it would have taken me forever, and again, I would have had to stop
She would have had to
doing
quit
everything
Bandette.
else.
Yeah.
So,
right, right,
um, but we knew the type of artist we wanted right away. We knew that again, we were.
Yeah, there was a long artist search. Me and Adrian Wassel, the head editor of Vault, like went through a lot of artists because I had said I kind of want this, and he kept bringing artists forward, or I kept bringing artists forward, and none of them really worked out. And it honestly got kind of frustrating because it took months. It was like a 4-month process.
Mhm.
And then one day he was he was talking to me, and he's like, let's just get this settled. What kind of artist would you like? And I'm like, that Scales and Scoundrels guy, Galad. I like his style. So
Somebody like him.
somebody like Galad, an art style like that. And Adrian called me the next day and he said, so you said somebody like Galad. How about Galad? Would that fit? And I'm like, yeah, he's within that wheelhouse. Let's get him.
Yeah.
So
nice.
we brought him on, but it's handy to have Colleen because like generally like if I'm working with an artist and they're not really getting what I want them to get, I have to write like 2.5 pages of this is what I mean and this is what I want. But with Colleen, if Glad isn't quite understanding, Colleen can sketch it all out and
Yeah.
send him a sketch and say this, and it's really handy how visually she speaks.
Yeah. And when we hit upon Galad or we knew it was possible that we would have him as an artist, I knew it was just right because as I said, there's a lot of like Dragon Ball Z, One Piece DNA in here. And you look at his art, and he's clearly heavily influenced by those artists and as well as the European. Obviously, he's French, so of course he'd look European.
Yeah.
But so it seemed like a really perfect fit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. How often are you doing thumbnails for him or that kind of a thing?
Very
Problem
seldom.
solving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
only when he clearly just like English is not his first language.
Right.
So sometimes he would just have like something going on where you can't really see what's happening, and
Mm-hmm.
and the storytelling just wasn't there to get what we wanted happening on that panel. So it's generally only just one panel at a time, at most two.
Is it difficult to write for someone whose native language isn't the same as your own? Like, do you change anything about the process?
It's kind of tough at times. Galad speaks, or actually, I'm not sure he speaks English really well, but he
Certainly writes it
he
well.
reads and writes it very well. We really haven't had too much in the way of translation problems with him, but I've certainly worked with
You've worked with a lot of
a
Italians,
lot of Italians and some French and a lot of
Spanish
South
speakers.
Americans and things like that. And occasionally it is tough. I've worked with some artists that the art that has to go to a translator first, and then it comes back kind of weird. So yeah, it can be. I try to be really aware of that and not put too much difficult language in at that time.
Not use too much American slang or
Yeah,
idioms.
the American slang and idioms are where it really can kind of
Right.
There's a story of an American artist writing with an Italian, I think, artist, where he describes somebody as being stone faced, like, and it was a superhero comic, so the artist drew like a brick wall.
Right.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny.
But yeah, it's something you have to watch. I primarily had the trouble back when I was writing for Marvel, because not only were they using a lot of seemed like primarily Italian, but the deadlines were so small that there wasn't much fixed time. So we really needed to be careful in that area.
Yeah. But something like WRASSLE Castle, it seems like there's not a lot of idioms that you're going to slip into, though, because of the setting. I would think, or less.
Yeah. We haven't really had any trouble. Again, Galad speaks pretty well, or reads and writes pretty well. Actually, have we ever even actually spoken with him?
I don't think so.
We have. Which is a weird thing about comics and the collaborative process. I mean, there are artists that I've done like an amazing amount of work together, like hundreds of pages of work together, but I've never met them. I've never been on the same continent with them. So it's kind of a weird friendship.
Yeah, one of the nice things about him too is because he comes from like that European background, it's really easy to. There's also a lot of like asterisks and obelisks DNA in WRASSLE Castle, so I know that we can rely on him to bring that kind of energy to the table. So yeah, he's a good fit.
Yeah. Also, let me just remind any of the viewers out there, if you've got questions, just to write them into the chat. We'll be happy to ask them out loud for you if you got anything.
Yeah, we love questions.
Yeah. But otherwise, I'm gonna keep talking. So clearly the title of WRASSLE Castle probably came before any of the characters.
Yes.
How did you then build backwards into like building a story around the idea?
I feel like it was easy.
Yeah, it all came kind of crashing in. Lydia was the first character that existed. She's the cover character. They're the main character, and then I like people who are, I don't want to say loners, but have taken their own path.
Yeah,
I think that's important and intriguing. And the whole like working out in the woods thing comes from my youth in Iowa to a certain degree, because I would go out in the woods and just kind of pretend I was a pirate, which is a cool and easy thing to pretend in Iowa, which is one of our most landlocked states. But there would also be like an occasional rotten tree that I could punch and it would fall over, and I would pretend I was a superhero, and it's like, yeah, woo, so like working out in the woods is like, as the feral child, is sort of almost where Lydia comes from. And then I wanted her to have a mentor that's not really a mentor. So her older brother was like, I think, the next character, or maybe it was the group of friends. Man, I love a good group of friends comic.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Yeah,
do.
it just kind of all kind of just rumbled in.
Yeah, and I mean,
And I wanted it to be like about friendship and family to a certain degree because, um, I mean, Wrestle Castle is fun and all, and the wrestling is fun, but there's no type of story that I care about unless I care about the characters.
mm,
So
Sure.
characters are always first for me, you know,
Mhm.
whether I'm writing superhero or all ages or my horror books or things like that. If I don't care about the people that the events are happening to, then I don't care about the events either. So the characters and the characterizations came first. So I
mm,
think I did what I generally do is I'll sit down and just write like almost baseball card stats for characters and who they
Mhm.
are, and then what they love, what their aspirations are, a bunch of stuff that'll never make it in the comic, but it informs me when I'm writing to and sort of makes them into real people because I can always tell like if somebody's writing like, let's just use the superhero genre, and it's like, well, what's this character? He fights for justice. No, what's his character? He fights for justice, and it's like, that's not character. That's a thing
Character.
he does, you know.
yeah,
And it just becomes so shallow and one dimensional that,
Yeah.
you know, like in a sticking with the superhero genre, you know, there I've read many comics where I'll, you know, be halfway through this dramatic, you know, wall blasting fight and go, yeah, I don't care who wins this fight, you
mm,
know. So yeah, the Wrestle Castle. I think there were a lot of characters before there was any story,
yeah.
because I care about characters a lot.
And then the whole the concept of like the tournament of the wrestling tournament, I think we came up with that and then sort of built everything out of that. It's like, well, they're having a tournament, but why?
Yeah.
And why is that important? And what is winning or losing the tournament going to do for the people involved?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then like the world building just sort of expanded out of there. Well, why did they wrestle? Is that important? And it's, I like to say that it's basically like, this is a fantasy adventure, and in most fantasies you've got some sort of magical element, and in Wrestle Castle the magic, it's not really magic, it's wrestling.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
So but it's like, that's just how um they produce that extra.
Hmm.
Makes sense. One of the things I really liked about the book were the like the little stat cards, you know.
I love a good
Uh
stat card.
uh where did those come in the process? Like, because you know, you were talking earlier about trying to come up with characters first. I was wondering if like some of these stat cards like sort of predated the
They
story
do.
at that point.
Yeah, they kind of do because when you're establishing a character, like I said, I'll write down things, and this was an easy way to sort of present some of the characterization to the readers, and I kind of love like I forget when they came out, but Marvel came out, and then I think everybody came out with like collector cards for their characters
It was
that
the
had all
90s.
stats, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and
It was the
then
90s.
like
Yeah.
it was like a battle between the fans because
Mhm.
it's like, you know, it's like, wait a second, Spider-Man's not more powerful than Colossus, but yet,
Right.
you know, and it's like, and it's fun to kind of compare and like
Mhm.
contrast actual stats. And I also come from a Dungeons and Dragons background,
Yes, yes.
um, and I really love like, you know, a good character stat page, especially since, you know, in the case of Wrestle Castle, if you notice over time people's stats will be raising
They do
sort of,
level up.
yeah, they can
Mhm.
level up and get
Mhm.
stronger, and I kind of like that. I love watching a character's progression. You know, it's one thing to say, "Oh, I feel stronger now, and I feel like I'm more skilled." But you know, to a certain degree, and when we do things like this, we can say, "You are stronger. You are, you know, more dexterous," and
It's always nice to have a nice quantifiable
yeah,
leveling up. It's one of the things that makes like role playing games really satisfying, or
hmm,
or
yeah.
or following sports, or whatever. And we just made it part of the whole world of this
Mhm.
fantasy.
Yeah. Do you guys play as part of the same group?
I don't currently play
Okay.
any right now.
Okay.
We were gonna get a group together, but COVID.
Things.
COVID. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the answer to so many things.
I know.
But
And then
COVID.
sort of draw off and go, but COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't played for years, but yeah, I used to love playing, and I play like, if I can play a good RPG video game, I'm all over that.
Yeah. 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 Me as well. Yeah, so oh, I know what I wanted to ask. Uh the, once you put the idea together and you're pitching it, how did it end up at Vault?
I forget how we first contacted Vault.
No.
Oh no, I don't
we,
forget.
We met
David DeCianke.
yeah.
One of the marketing guys, used to live in town and work for Oni, I think.
Dark Horse?
Yeah.
I forget.
I forget where he worked, but
Was it in San Diego?
Yeah, we were at the San Diego convention and we ran across David, who's a friend, and
Just said hello.
I just sort of lost track with him, and I'm like, "Where you been?" And he's like, "Oh, I work at Vault now." And I'm like, "Oh, I've heard good things about them." And he's like, "Yeah, you should come over and meet the guys." And we came over and meet the guys, and they said,
and the guys were like, "Ooh, you guys, let's work together."
Yeah. So we gave them a couple of pitches, and they grabbed them both, and it's just,
Oh, nice.
I love working with them. Adrian and Damian Wassel are both like really energetic about comics and really have that. They want you to take Tim and the whole group there. They want you to take chances, and I really like that. So many editors will say, "Well, you've pitched a thing that doesn't quite fit anywhere, so I'm not sure what we could do with it." But they have you've pitched a thing that doesn't quite work anywhere, so that's awesome because it's new.
Go with it
Let's
and make
do
it more.
So and I really like their energy. They're intriguing.
Had you pitched it as an original graphic novel or a series of graphic novels, or did you pitch it originally as a periodical serialized comic, or how?
I think they gave us a parameter and we pitched to that parameter that they said they wanted to do graphic novel series. I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, don't quote us on that. That sounds
I don't know.
right-ish.
Yeah.
Or they got the pitch and they said, we think this would work best as this.
Yeah.
Something like
the
that.
The only reason I ask is because up until now, so this is the first of the kids line.
Mhm.
Was it Wonderbound? Is that the technical name of the line?
Mhm.
And it's the first thing that I can think of where they've done an original graphic novel rather than serialized.
I think they did want the imprint to be that way, like do graphic novel size, book size things. I think they did it partly to appeal to the library market because everybody likes library, and so I think that was intentional. Yeah.
And I love the format. I think it's the perfect format for the story. So
obviously there are things that would be different about the way you tell the story if it were shorter or if it were longer. Is this length, this particular, because it's certainly thinner than Bandette is, by 20% at least, or even Banana Sunday, So what about this particular length do you like, if anything? I don't know.
I like it because it's a length that I'm kind of familiar with. I write all the Plants vs. Zombies graphic novels, and those are always 72 pages. So I'm used to telling stories at about that range, 72, 80 pages, where I feel like you can get, you can't have an expansive story in 80 pages, I don't think. But that's part of the reason why WRASSLE Castle is a series of graphic novels. But I feel like you can get an amazing amount of story in it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's because I come from writing, when I started my career in comics, it was all in like just comics. So I learned to write at 22 pages.
Yeah.
So I'm very set in the 22-page aspect. Like when I was writing at Marvel, they went down to 20 pages, and I could not believe how hard it was to lose 2 pages.
Yeah.
And now I write at
That's 10% of what you had too.
yeah.
You know?
Mhm.
And now I write some horror titles at Aftershock, and
Yeah.
Aftershock is 24 pages.
Right.
And 24 pages seems like I
Woo,
was like,
let
woo,
down your
I'm just
hair.
gonna
Yeah.
go crazy.
Yeah.
So 80 pages is more than enough for me to tell a lot of story and
Mm.
work in a little more characterization.
And it's a good manageable like production rate
Mhm.
length where you
Yeah.
can get one volume out and then another one. And I mean, the first volume was delayed by a year because COVID.
Yeah.
But
And they're not all the same length. I believe like
yeah.
volume 3, I think, came in at like 120 pages. So
Oh, okay.
we just needed more. But
Uh-huh.
like 80 pages like is enough to tell a lot of story, but it's short enough that it's easy to avoid saying, oh, just throw this extra stuff in there, you know, and things like that. And going back to working at Marvel again, like I worked with an editor, Nate Cosby, who I still think is one of the best editors I've ever worked with. And he would like every time I turned a script in, there was at least like one page that he would go, so this page, why is it here? You know,
Mm.
what's the point to the story?
Mhm,
You know,
mhm.
is this just a page because you needed an extra page? Where does it lead us? Why is it here? And so I always think of those terms. And 80 pages is enough to get a ton of story in, but still avoid that. I had a 75-page story, and I'll throw in this extra stuff. And extra
Yeah.
stuff drives me crazy, unless it's characterization sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think characterization is not extra stuff. I think it's
No, agreed.
extra caring.
Yeah, and it should always drive the action.
Right. Yeah.
In a good story, you know. It's that's the thing. It looks like we have a question, so Jordan's going to put that question up. Hello from Maggie. Oh, it's Melina. I'm Melina. How did you come up with the idea to have these sort of modern teenagers in a medieval setting?
I don't know. I think maybe I've been talking a lot about characters, and characters to me are sort of across the ages. So I'm not sure I see them as modern teenagers. I just see them as teenagers.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's part of like working from Bandette, because if you're familiar with Bandette is sort of a timeless thing.
Sort of 60s, sort of.
Yeah, I consider Bandette to be sort of 50s and 60ish, but they're also using cell phones and things like that. So I don't know. I kind of want to, even though it's a medieval fantasy setting, I wanted it to be timeless.
And I think it's important to have a historical setting. This isn't real history, but it's fantasy history, and show that people are people. It's like we've been watching this time team thing, this archaeology thing where people dig up old settlements in England.
Right.
And one of the main things you learn about people when you dig up their old houses from hundreds or thousands of years ago is, you know, they were cooking, they were playing with toys, they were, you know, cleaning their ears. They found an ear scraper. So, you know, these people were just people. They were telling jokes and getting in fights and, you know, flirting and all that sort of thing. So it's not like a fantasy person is some sort of special being, unless that's how you write them.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just wanted them to be normal kids.
Short answer is kind of people be people in my mind. So yeah, and I don't see them as much modern as they are timeless.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
That actually made me think. I like that question.
We got some smart kids. So, oh man, that's great. So you said that you I think you just said in passing that you already you're on book 3 at this point. Are you past that? How far is this going?
I think
the first story arc is 3.
Yeah, the first story arc is 3, and then we're just gonna kind of wait because we're so far ahead right now.
Yeah.
There's no reason to work ahead more.
Mhm.
And part of that was because of COVID.
Mhm.
So yeah, volume 3 is about half done now.
As far as
Wow.
art, yeah.
Wow.
Got some editing to do.
Yeah, some editing, but yeah. But yeah, after that, I mean, we have story ideas in mind, but for a little while, there's no reason to work ahead right now because we're so far ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you guys working on more Bandette as well?
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely, all the
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Colleen's main job.
Yeah. That's what I
Yeah.
do most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I'm working on the last chapter of the current story arc right now. So
Okay. Nice. And seemed like there was a pretty big gap between 3 and 4. At least it felt like it from my side as a reader.
yeah,
Is it is what caused that?
it was delayed by a year.
Yeah,
Okay.
It was delayed by 2020.
COVID.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also I it's like Bandit was always supposed to be this job that I did like when I wasn't doing other stuff, and then it
Yeah.
became my main thing.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years, I've picked up some commercial jobs, commercial illustration jobs. So I always like, again, I'm not a two things at once person. So I'd be like, scramble, scramble, scramble to do the commercial job for whatever it is, and then come back to Bandette, and
Mhm.
it's kind of artisanal
Mhm.
comics.
I would think that commercial jobs tend to not be comics though, right? They tend to
Oh
be
no,
spot illos.
no,
Yeah.
illustrations.
Yeah. So that's still true for you, even though sort of the muscles are different between telling a story and just a spot illo.
Yeah.
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 No, that's cool. That's not a judgy question. That was just again, I'm interested. Yeah.
No, yeah. If I have a job with like a deadline, I'm
Yeah.
like, I gotta get this done. I gotta get this off my plate. I gotta turn it in, and then that's all I'm focused on, because I just can't like set it aside for a minute because I'm like, but I gotta get it done. So
It gets tough with me when like she would be like delving into some project, and then I would need her input on Wrestle Castle scripts and things like that, and
Yeah.
I'd almost literally have to just drag her over to the computer and say, "What do you think about this? Where should we do this?" And she's
Yeah.
like,
but
"But I
I'm
gotta
not
do."
thinking about that right now.
Yeah. I
Deadlines
understand.
is deadlines, though.
I
Yeah.
understand. Colleen, let me talk about your artistic process a little. When you get a script, well, when you get his scripts, I guess at this point, what's the first step you do with turning it into a page of comics?
The first thing I do is read the script, and
Mhm.
then I break down each page into the number of panels, which he's already, I know how many panels are on each page, but I have a very this gets a little in the weeds, but I have a very rigid setup for each page layout. It's always
Mhm.
3 tiers.
Mhm.
So 1, 2, 3.
Mhm.
And then there's always at least 3 panels on a page. So each of those tiers gets broken up on the page into the number of panels it needs to be. I look at what's happening in each panel to decide how big that panel needs to be. I think about like the rhythm of the action. So like, is something happening that needs to be sort of associated with another panel on that tier? And then, so I've got the shape of the panels first
Mhm.
before I draw anything.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this is all on computer. This is all in Clip Studio Paint.
Okay.
And then I go in and very roughly like sketch out as though I were using a big fat Sharpie marker, sketch out where each person is going to be. Sometimes I'll letter at that point. so that I can make sure that all the lettering will fit
Yeah.
within the design
Yeah.
that I need it to be. And that helps later because then I go back to those early sketches and I refine them. And those are my pencils. Again, that's all on computer. And so I make sure that everything looks nice. And I print that out in very pale blue lines on paper. And I use ink wash, which is just watered down ink, to draw everything. I don't draw like the panel borders or everything because that's already been done on the computer.
Yeah.
So the paper is all the art, but like without panel borders, it's all just sort of floaty and sort of bleeds out. Then I scan that back into the computer,
Yeah.
slide it on under the panel borders and the letters, and then I color underneath that.
Wow.
You know, you were talking earlier about like if we're writing for someone that speaks a foreign language, another like translate thing that you need to do as a writer in comics is how to write a script based on how the artist reads a script.
Absolutely.
Because like Colleen will read an entire script and then like sketch everything out and deal with things. But I'm doing a horror book right now called Bunny Mask with Andrea Moody.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrea literally reads one page of script and then illustrates that completely and then reads the next page of script.
Wow.
So
wow.
I know. So when I write for him, I need to be aware that when he's illustrating this page, he doesn't know what happens on the next page. And I became aware of that when like I introduced a character and like, you know, he's like, I really like her. What's going to happen to her? And I'm like, you have the script. You know what's going to happen to her. And he's like, well, I haven't read ahead. And it's like, oh, okay. So then I need to make sure that I'm telling him everything that happens that he needs to know. There's no like going ahead for him in a script. It's that page. So it's interesting how each artist, not only how they translate script reading as they go. It's a very different process.
Yeah, and my actual process got interrupted again last year because a lot of times like I'll do those panels like I said before all at once, but usually as I go through a script, I'll do like 4 pages of breakdowns and then maybe do some lettering and then do a few more breakdowns and then do some penciling and then do some more breakdowns, some more lettering, and then do some inking and some coloring, just depending upon my mood. But I do it all at my studio, which is a shared space downtown. I wasn't going to my studio for a year.
Right.
So for the previous episode that came out just a few months ago, I had to do all the layouts, all the lettering, all the printout at the same time, and then all the inking at the same time because I had to bring it all home to work on it. So that I only took like 2 trips downtown to get all the technical stuff done. And it was really hard because I couldn't just do whatever I wanted. I had to do it all at the same time in stages so that I could get all the scanning done at once. So that was really hard, and it made me really appreciate like being able to move freely about the world.
Is there just because I'm curious, is there anything that changing your process taught you or made you feel better about parts of your process, if you see what I mean?
Sure. Not really. It just made me irritated.
Well, I meant more like maybe like, oh, when you're doing all the inking at once, that maybe you feel like your inking is getting better or something. Do you know what I mean? Because you can concentrate on that as a particular thing. Maybe
I I think not though, because I think it made me impatient.
Mm,
It made me
mm,
realize that part of the reason I do it in chunks is because that makes my what we call mojo
yeah,
get a
yeah,
little bit more
Well, you like
filled
the
up.
like if you do 4 pages at a time, you're
Yeah,
constantly getting your reward. It's like, well, these pages are finished.
right,
that's the thing.
right, right.
Again, to go back to like a video game, you level up, you're like, yay, I did a
Yeah,
thing, and then you go back to the beginning and you're like, yay, I
yeah,
did a thing.
yeah,
Yeah, when you can say yay, I did a thing in chunks in a big
yeah.
project, that's always good.
Impatience and is like a big killer for a lot of artists I know, and I
Hmm.
know a lot of the artists that do like monthly books
Yeah.
will illustrate like the first third of a book, and then the last third of a book, and then the middle third of a book, and they do that because they know that the last art that they do is probably going to be the worst because they're
Because they're
going to be the
tired.
most
Right.
impatient.
Sure.
So the best 2 pieces, the best are the beginning and the end, and then in the middle they're just like, I'm going to be slogging there, so that's
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to be the lesser artwork.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's it's always interesting seeing how people like work their little magic.
I never work ahead that way. I always do 1 page, 2 page, 3
Yeah.
page. I don't know why.
Hmm.
I think it's just a mental thing.
And like you asked earlier, like how complete my scripts are. When I started writing scripts, I thought that this was how scripts are done.
Right.
Um, but I can remember like when I got my first job at Marvel, and I asked Nate Cosby, who was the editor, okay, what's how do you want me to format my scripts? And he went, I don't care, just do
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah.
it's like, and then I found out that like everybody just does scripts in a different way. And as I got to know different writers, it's like it's crazy. It's
Yeah.
crazy how some of these guys. There's a couple of, and I will not name names ever, but there's a couple of like good friends who are writers and esteemed writers, and I've seen their scripts, and I'm like, what is this
I wouldn't know
mess?
how to make
You are
heads or tails of
crazy.
them.
Yeah.
I can't believe
Yeah.
you script like this.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Some people write screenplays and like,
Yeah.
I don't know how a screenplay looks,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can
The best thing about comics, though, or one of the best things about comics is that every answer is right.
yeah.
Yes.
There's not one way you have to do it, and that's the
Mhm.
only way it can be.
Right.
Right.
However you choose to work, as long as you produce good work at the end, it all works out fine.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you were making movies, right, you must write in screenplay format. You have to. No one
Mhm.
will look at you at all if you
Right.
don't do it exactly like that. And I think to a degree that changes the work from necessity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the final product becomes more rigid in a way, right?
Mhm.
Because this is the way you do it. You don't
Mhm.
do it other ways, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I always like hate like on Twitter a lot. I'll run across people saying the proper way to do comics, and I'm like, nope, I'm done with you. There
Yeah.
is no proper way to do
There's no
comics.
Yeah.
proper way. Yeah.
When I write for myself, and it's usually like short stories, like really short, like at most 8 pages, I'll actually draw my script first.
Mm.
Not draw like what happens, but like
Mhm.
I will actually draw 8 rectangle page shaped rectangles
Mhm.
and then write in that just a word to say this is what happened on this page.
Mhm.
Like like run, catch, that
Sure.
sort of thing. And that helps me make the framework to start from. That's like the first word on the page.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as I said, this is a series of interviews. You guys are probably somewhere close to 225, 250 cartoonists that we've talked to, and we never hear the. I don't know that I've heard the same answer twice
Yeah.
of
Mhm.
process. You
Yeah.
know, which I love. I adore that about comics.
Mhm.
I'm curious, Colleen, the shift between drawing digitally and then inking physically it seems like there's such different muscles can you talk about that just a little?
Sure. So the ink part is like the finished art. that you see on the page. I think it would be it's faster for me in a lot of ways to do it with real ink on a page than it would be to draw it digitally. Like and also it's more satisfying. It just feels good.
Having an actual tangible thing is
It's nice.
nice.
That's never really like one of my goals, is to have something that I can put on a wall or whatever, although it is nice to have. But it just feels good, and it feels more organic, for lack of a better word. I've done a lot of purely digital drawing and some digital painting, and it's good, and I like it. It just doesn't feel organic. As much as the ink wash. And I don't know if it was an aesthetic choice or what.
Yeah. When did you start using digital?
Shortly after I found out about the program,
Okay.
Clip Studio Paint, which was called Manga Studio at the time.
Yeah.
And it's just a really good way to not have to use pencils and erasers. Which before I started working digitally, I would like pencil page, and then I would slap it on a light box and trace and make sure that everything looked the way I wanted it to. It was a process, and I used a lot of paper. Probably wasted a lot of paper. This way you can shrink or expand to make things fit better. You can sort of move things around to make them fit better. It's just another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, I think the digital is a good way to plan ideas and to execute ideas and have all that passion, but then the inking is a good way to execute those ideas that you've got.
Yeah.
So,
and I know artists who do it the complete reverse way, where they'll sketch things out physically and then they'll scan it and finish it digitally. So it's just whatever tool you want to use.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah. No, I was just interested in your approach. Let's talk about composing a page, and let's talk about the page turn a little bit, because to me the page turn is sort of the most important part of comics, that because it propels you forward. How much time do either of you think about it actively versus just going, oh, that seems right?
I don't know. I maybe used to think about it actively more than I do now, and now that I've written, I don't know how many thousands of pages, it just, I might be in the it feels right. The only time I'll actively, like truly actively think of it is I hate scene changes, like in the middle of a page or something like that.
Unless there are a lot of scene pages on a page.
Yeah, sometimes, like in Bandetta is a good example. There can be like 4 different scenes on a page, so then it's no big deal. But if there's been a scene that takes like 5 pages to tell, and it quote unquote ends on the second to last panel of a page, it's like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Have a reason for the next. And like you say, you do kind of want to lure readers to the next page, and yourself, honestly, because you should be enjoying the story yourself, or what's the point of telling it?
Yeah, it's always really satisfying to have a single page's art to be one story. It's like you can read that page and you've got it's like a sentence, has a subject and an object and a verb or whatever. It's nice to have a page be that complete little story within the story.
But it's also nice to have a last panel of a character going, oh, what's that? Because you do at that point as a reader, you're like, well, what is that? I need to check out and see what's on the next page. So yeah, page turns are big in my mind, but I think they're an ingrained thought for me now from all the earlier thoughts I had.
I do. I think it's a lot of instinct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
I think Steve Durbin.
What else did I want to just ask? You both have had careers where you have done comics aimed at adults as well as comics aimed at kids. You're, I would say, you're both primarily working as kids authors, kind of primarily these days. I don't know, Paul, if you would agree with that necessarily.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of Plants vs Zombies. There's WRASSLE Castle. There's Bandette. So from a bulk point of view, it seems that way from my side. What do you like about working on kids, oriented comics?
I think you can go in a lot more directions in kids comics, and you can blend genres a lot more, and fantastical elements kind of coming out of the blue is okay in kids comics, where I think comics for adults are a little more rigid. I feel the same, like I work in prose as well, and I think it's the same across whatever medium. I don't do film, but I think it's true for film as well, that with kids you can introduce those adventure and fantastical elements with a lot more ease
And absurdity.
Yeah,
I think adults get a little feel like they're being tricked or something if you throw too much absurdity at them.
Yeah, maybe Wes Anderson gets away with an adult story with absurdity, but I'm not him. So yeah, I just think that just the directions that you can go in a sudden leap. We're an adult. When you're working in the adult form, like if you're going to take an absurd turn, you need to set it up. You need to do this. You need to do that. And
Right.
and kids can be like playing basketball and having a good time playing basketball, and it's a story about basketball, and suddenly there's an elephant on the court, and they're like, "No, we're playing against an elephant," and it's like, that's fine. There's an elephant now. That's cool. You don't need to
Grown-up
worry
would
about.
want to know why there's an elephant.
Where did the
why
elephant
are you
come
asking?
from?
That's a silly question. That's not the point.
Yeah, maybe I grew up like watching Monty Python and things like that, and so I love me a good dose of absurdity, and I think it's easier to do that in the kids genre.
Yeah. Again, it's funny though, because Monty Python is absolutely not for kids.
I know. Well, it was.
But we
me.
watched it anyway,
Yeah,
right?
it was for me.
Absolutely. Do you have to self-edit yourself very much when you're writing for kids, or is it just natural?
It's pretty natural.
You know who's going to be reading it, so you're like, it's like having conversation with a child versus having a conversation with an adult. You know what's appropriate to say or not to say, and that's what you do.
The only like editing I do, like when I'm writing all ages material, is to make sure, and this is pretty ingrained in me now too, that I'm not talking down to kids.
Yeah.
That I'm not. Oh, I'll simplify this so that you can understand. Because when I was growing up, it was the harder concepts that I wanted to read about. I don't want to be talked to like I don't understand things. If I didn't understand things, I wouldn't be reading the story.
Yeah.
And that was part of the editors are gone now, but I had trouble at Marvel Adventures a couple of times when they were like, I don't think kids will understand this concept. And it's like, well, they will, first of all. And second of all, that's part of why you read, is to learn new concepts.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to be writing a book that an 8-year-old might be reading, I want to make sure, I don't want an editor tell me, make sure that a 4-year-old could understand it. And it's like, why? It's like, it's all ages. The story needs to tell itself. And if you make sure that's like, the same editors would do things like they would go in and self-edit a joke. So I would tell a joke, and then they would insert a panel of someone explaining the joke.
This is why this is funny.
And it's like, do that. And so they would talk down to adult readers as well. And I think if you talk down to your readers, you're a terrible writer. Just terrible. Why would anybody read? So when I'm writing kids, I think I'm in my 50s now, and the jokes should be funny to me. you
Yeah.
know, and it's like the only thing I try not to like. I try to remember that I'm older, and so like some of the references that I will say, it's like, wow, they won't know that one
Right.
at
They won't
all.
know who Monty Python is,
Yeah,
or
they might
Right.
not know Monty
Right.
Python, or you know why the Bee Gees are ironically cool and
Right. Right.
things like that.
it's
So
it's not irony.
yeah, references, certain references, you know, and things like that. But as far as like what's appropriate, yeah, you just you know the box you play in pretty much
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah. It's I love the notion that kids comics are more open to absurdity in things, particularly because when you're working on, it strikes me, on like Marvel superheroes, you can't ever take them out of their boxes because the audience has grown so used to the box that they
Mhm.
get freaked out if you change the box even a little bit.
Yes.
To a certain degree, but that it depends. Like Deadpool and Squirrel
Mm.
Girl and things like that. I mean, there are whole groups of readers that embrace the absurdity,
Sure.
as long as you let them know it's absurdity.
Right.
I mean, and there are plenty of things. I think pretty much all Marvel readers, as long as you told them, well, this isn't necessarily canon,
Yeah.
you know, are fine.
Well, with Marvel Adventures, when you were doing that, I mean, they had some very specific rules that you had to stay within. And they were useful rules because then you could just
There
write
weren't so
around those
much character
rules.
rules. They were just
No.
like levels of violence I could do and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of miss the days of like, uh, again, I grew up reading, I'm not quite that old, but I grew up reading tons of like mid 60s comics.
Sure.
Um, and I kind of like the whole, you know, true absurdity, especially the DC comics. It's like, oh, what's Jimmy Olsen doing this time? Oh, he's a giant turtle
Yeah.
and things like that. And I like that level of absurdity because again, as long as you care about the characters, to me, it doesn't really matter what they're doing. You know, whether it's humor, horror, things like that. Um, I kind of like a little dose of something new.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean because uh, here's another name I won't name, but I did a panel once a long time ago with an editor, and um, and I could not have disagreed with him more on a statement because he was talking about he was editing a book. It was a Marvel book. I won't say because you could start to figure it out who these are. But a big writer had just left the book, and the editor on the panel said, and that gives me a real problem as an editor because my job as an editor is to make sure that the next guy that comes in writes the same amount or the same type of material in the same way because you don't want to frighten the readers with new material.
Ooh.
And it's like I'm just staring at him going, oh, I hope I never work for this guy.
Yeah.
Frighten me with new material. It's like what do you want to do? Like, oh, I just bought issue, you know, 100 of Battle whatever, and it's
Yeah.
like I think I'll buy it again and read it again, and then just
Yeah.
read it again and read it again. Of course, you want something new.
Yeah, we were just talking about the Frank Miller Daredevil run back in the 80s and how
Even 70s, it started in
yes,
the 70s.
yeah, and how important that was in changing things. And then I think about like before that, like Neil Adams at DC or any of those like
Yeah,
just sudden changes
yeah.
that made things.
That issue of Daredevil that Frank worked on, where Daredevil fights the Hulk, that
Mhm.
to me was that to me ushered in a new age of comics because like earlier when I was talking about Submariner and the Hulk battling it out, um, comics for a long time, like even disparity of power was like it didn't matter. They were gonna kind of fight and be even and then walk away. But in that issue, if people aren't aware of it, Hulk fights Daredevil, and that's a pretty strong disparity of strength.
Mhm.
And Daredevil gets whooped. He
Mhm.
barely lives.
Mhm.
He ends the issue like broken bones laying on the ground. And I thought it was like it was to me it was a sense of realism that and it made me like Daredevil more. And I think that for so long,
even though Hulk is your guy.
yeah, even though the Hulk's my guy, I think for so long that people got caught up on the, why, if I'm going to like a superhero, then I should like the strongest superhero because he's the coolest. But to me, like, and in the writing of that book, Daredevil's fight against something that he knew he couldn't win against was like one of the greatest hero moments I had ever read. And I think it really resonated through comics as a whole. That to me was more important than Dark Knight or Watchmen or anything like that, because it was characterization rather than just, oh, he fights justice, And I love that issue so much.
I really like that answer.
Yeah.
Let's ask about sort of one last thing before we start to wrap it up. You're Paul, you're writing a lot of comics that are based on licensed things. Plants vs. Zombies. You've written Witcher comics. I mean, there's a whole panoply of things that you've written. What's the difference between writing that and writing your own idea? Does it change anything about how you approach the story, or the kinds of stories you try to or want to tell?
I don't know. I again, like, I think the first thing I do is like, I'll just use Witcher. It's easiest to use. The first thing, I was a Witcher fan at the time that I was writing Witcher, and so the first thing that I questioned myself is like, why do I like Witcher? Why do I like this guy? What about his personality and what about his world do I like? So, and I think when I say that I like to write character, I think like Witcher is a good example of this. Witcher himself is a character, but the world he lives in is a character as well. And I think you can't write the Witcher like separate from his world. So I just kind of delve into the character of it and then kind of build stories around that. I don't worry too much about boundaries in licensed material. I mean, it's backfired on me a couple of times where I'll go, oh, I think this would be the coolest thing, and I've developed, I've spent X amount of time doing this, and then the licensor will go, nah, I don't like that.
That's not going to work.
And licensors are very, very different too.
Yeah.
Some of them will like go, just do what you want, we'll and some of them will go, we have very specific ideas and you will be constrained within the smallest box you will ever understand. Like from an artistic standpoint, I can remember when a friend of mine was working as an artist on Barbie, and the licensors literally had how many lines of Barbie could have in her hair.
Wow.
It was that close. It's like you have to have this specific amount of lines to delineate her hair. And I've never run across anything that bad from the writing aspect, but some of them will clamp down pretty hard. And that makes it a little
especially
tough.
when there's a big media like corporation behind the product. They're going to have their needs, and they're going to have somebody that tells you whether or not you're meeting their needs.
Sure.
So,
but some of them, like PopCap and EA, like when I started on Plants vs. Zombies, I said, so what kind of thing you want to do? And they went, I don't know, develop something. And I said, okay. And I just went off and created a world, and I've been having fun there ever since. So I don't know. To me, like an interesting thing that like media just comes with a box, and everything comes with a box. So it's not that bad a deal. But it's fascinating to me, like you didn't ask this, but like some people will say, so you write media properties like Aliens, Predator. How's that different from working like on Spider-Man? And I'm like, what? It's also a media property, But there's a lot of traditionalists that see superheroes as almost creator owned in a way. But they have a bigger, tighter box, because at least if you write Spider-Man, you're writing, gosh, I wouldn't even come close to guessing how many stories Spider-Man has had.
Right.
It's always fun, like thinking if like every story was real. It's like, how busy is one of
Yeah.
Peter Parker's individual days? He's
Yeah.
like, I got
Yeah.
11 o'clock meeting with Doc Ock, and then I'm
Yeah.
off to Latvia to fight
Yeah.
Latveria to fight Doctor Doom because
Yep.
and then I'm dating 6 different girls, and you know, it's like he leads a busy life. So you kind of come up with you have to do a lot of research on some of those, but like when I wrote the Prometheus comic, you know, I needed to watch a movie kind of.
Yeah.
So there wasn't much research. Yeah, everything comes with a box, even if it's creator owned.
I kind of like working in a box sometimes.
Well, it's
because
fun to expand the box. It's fun to find ways out of the box.
Exactly, and it gives you a structure to work around, to build upon, and you know where you're standing, so you know where you can go. And then that sort of gives you the creative freedom of coloring within the lines, but coloring it really cool. And
pushing at the lines and pushing at the box, because I think that's part of what you should do with. I never want to be a guy who you know, like they say, oh, Paul Tobin worked on this. Well, what did he do? He told another story, and it's like no, he expanded it a little bit. He pushed this. He made me question this character. He made me, you know, these relationships, and I think that's fascinating about working on the box. Is like. And you can usually get away with that, like with a media property, because I mean, they're storytellers too. They wonder what their characters will do, and if you can surprise them, by like saying, "Okay, here's a story that takes place within your box, except this one little bit that kind of steps outside the box for a bit," then they will often say, "Oh, that's so fascinating. We can't pass that up. Let's do this."
Yeah. Oh, cool. I like that answer. I like that answer a lot. So we know there's more WRASSLE Castle coming, and we know there's more Bandette coming. Is there anything else you guys would like to plug?
Let's see. I'm doing Bunny Mask. They're horror books, but I'm doing Bunny Mask and My Date with Monsters at Aftershock. What else am I doing? I don't know. What else?
There's so much.
I have 3 things in my
Plants vs. Zombies all the time.
Plants vs. Zombies. I have things in my head, but they haven't been announced.
They haven't been announced. This is the danger of doing interviews and then remembering what you're working on, but you've forgotten what you've already done. The stuff
It's been
actually
announced.
out.
It gets nutty sometimes too. Like when I did that, I mean, this is a very small project, but when I did the Fallen Skies comic, I had done that a year and a half before the television show had shown. And after a year and a half of keeping a secret, you just figure everyone knows by then.
Right.
You know, so it's hard to keep secrets on some of your upcoming projects because, I mean, you literally live them. You know, you spend your day working on them and things like that. And you've been, in many cases, doing it for months or even a year. And it's like, well, everybody knows about that by now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of all the things that we have out. Oh, you keep having stories reprinted in the Marvel things, and let's see. So there's Bandette, Banana Sundays in print.
Yep.
WRASSLE Castle, Bunny Mask, Heist, science fiction, My Date with Monsters, horror.
Yeah, I think like when you said like you're primarily like you're.
I think you're better qualified to say what we've got out there.
See, like
I always am interested in what creators want to plug themselves. You know?
Yeah, but it's like I now realize, like when you were talking earlier and you said, Paul, your most of your stuff is all ages and kids, and I was like, is it? And it's like you're looking at the stuff that's announced, and I'm like knowing like other projects.
Exactly.
So I'm like, I don't know.
Exactly.
Because there's more horror coming from me and things like that. And I'm working on a graphic novel right now that I can't talk about, which is fun. It's about food, and like research is fun for me, and food research is becoming a lot of fun because I'm I'm one of the least culinary guys in the world.
You do not have an adventurous palate.
I do have an adventurous palate, but I never have much chance to do it. So working with an entire graphic novel that's very food based is very interesting for me. Plus, I can take food off on my taxes now.
Yeah, sure.
See, this is secretly the best part of being a creator is as long as you can take it off your taxes.
Yeah.
No, it's research. It's research.
Like you were talking about, you do like some video game stuff, and it's like part of that was like, yeah, there's no video game system that I can't take off on my taxes now. I'll get all these games and then just write that stuff off.
It is completely legit.
Totally legit.
It's completely legit. Yeah. No, absolutely. That's great. Okay, so here's the last question. Here's the wrap-up question, and it's that this is a series of interviews with creators. A fair amount of people watch them because they want to be doing comics themselves. And a lot of times they don't really know where to start or what to do or, so I would love both of you to kind of give your kind of pep talk for comics or something that people can think about, whether it's something physical, whether it's something emotional, whether it's something spiritual, whatever you would say to an aspiring comic maker.
Man, just get out there and do it. Like when I was growing up, you couldn't really get on the internet at all and create comics. Don't think that printed comics are the end goal anymore. They're one goal and a great goal because I will always love printed comics and graphic novels and things like that. But if you want to get into comics, a lot of editors look at the internet as where to grab comics from, where to grab creators from, and there are plenty of avenues that you can do that, and just even your own website. Just don't worry, just create, because you want a body of work. Don't be one of those people that just has plans. Be someone who makes them, and your first comics will be terrible. My first 300 comics were terrible. Don't worry about it. Just do number 301.
And my biggest bit of advice is start making things and making short things that you can finish, because this goes back to the thing before where you want to have that sense of completion. I think a lot of people think, well, I'm going to write this 300-page opus. I'm going to build this whole world, blah, blah, blah. It's really hard to do that. Some people can do that for their first project and be perfectly happy working on that 300-page thing forever. Most people need to be able to say, I started it, I finished it, I feel good about this, I put this out, and then move on to the next thing. Because that allows you to grow too, because a lot of times if you're making that big long thing, your first stuff isn't that great, and your middle stuff is really good, and you're tempted to go back and sort of
rework
that. And that's what we call one of these time loops, where you're just going to be sort of stuck in this space. So maybe just go there, finish it, and then start again. And then finish that, and then you're gonna get better every time.
Yeah, incremental, and just
and you're gonna feel good about it.
Just go forward. Go forward. Colleen had a friend that was a set manager for plays, and he had a phrase that has resonated with me forever, and it was 3 simple words: "Done is beautiful." And I think people need to understand that, and just finish some projects. Move on, love the things that you've finished, and then create better things.
And be done. Be done with that thing and move on to the next.
Perfect. I think that's fantastic advice. I agree with both the things you guys both said. I want to thank you both for talking to us about the book. I also want to thank you for the book because it was a really good book and it was a lot of fun. And I know the kids in the club are really loving it, and I know they're really excited that there's going to be more. So it's always the best reaction that we can get. And same thing with Mandette. You're such a good artist. You are such a good artist. I love your art. Oh my God. Oh man. Okay. So that's the book for the month. Jordan, put me on a 1. Thank you. If you're sitting at home and you're like, I need to read something and I don't know what to read, you will not do worse than reading WRASSLE CASTLE. It's a swell book. It's a lot of fun, and there's way more of it coming up. So with that in mind, oh wait, let's do the let's say next month we'll tell you next month's book is Manu from Kelly Fernandez. This is a very fun book. You're gonna like this one a lot too. And then for the other shows for December, we're doing Far Sector for the Adult Club. So we're interviewing N.K. Jemisin and Jamal Campbell. And then for the Classics Club, Enigma. So we're going to be talking to Pete Milligan and Duncan for I think it's for Grado, I think. We'll find that out. But this was WRASSLE Castle, and I want to thank everybody who's a member of the club. I want to thank Paul and Colleen there. Yes, they're right. Paul and Colleen, thank you so much. I want to thank Jordan for running the show. I want to thank my staff, Katie and Kat and Zoe, for keeping the store going so I can do these kinds of things. And mostly I want to thank all of you. Read more comics, man. That's what it's all about. We'll talk to you next month. Thanks very much for watching this episode of the Kids Graphic Novel of the Month Club. If you enjoyed what you were seeing, please subscribe and hit the bell up in the corner. We'd like to invite you to join the club. Every month you'll get a great new book curated by our staff, and it's a fantastic program. So please join. That address is running along the bottom right now. Thanks very much.